Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider with the National Weather Service. You're watching Alaska Weather with us on this 15th of January. Thanks for tuning in tonight. We hope you're staying safe and enjoying your Alaska weather as best as possible. As always, you can check the latest forecast and information for warnings, watches, and advisories 24 hours a day at 1-800-472-0391. That is the Alaska Weather Information Line. It is free to you inside of Alaska, brought to you by the National Weather Service. As always, our webpage is up and running at weather.gov/Alaska. There's a mobile version of this, mobile.weather.gov. It works a lot better for your mobile device. Tablets included there. It is a low bandwidth option, which I highly recommend. Customize it to your suit and your needs, and simply type in your location, AK. So let's say McCarthy, for example. You would type in McCarthy, AK, and load that up. It will save in your preferred list of locations, save that page to your home screen, and it will act just like your own personal weather app. Next time you go to McCarthy, check it out. David.Snider@NOAA.gov is an easy way to contact me. If you see something on the show you don't understand, you don't like, or you really love, let me know. Send us your pictures around Alaska, and perhaps we'll even feature them on the show. Thanks for watching again tonight, and it's my pleasure to serve you with high wind warnings for Juneau and Douglas. The high wind warnings will continue not only just tonight, but now extended into your Thursday, as the weather pattern looks to be pretty blustery around northern parts of southeast. There may be times where we're not talking about wind gusts that are that 60 and 70 mile an hour range, but it is going to be rather windy no matter what it is. It looks like it is going to be fairly blustery throughout the period, perhaps reaching into that high level at times. So a high wind warning certainly likely. Up across the White Pass region, you guessed it, another wind chill advisory will continue for the region tonight, and it looks like values could drop as low as 55 to 65 below. Down the hill just a little bit into Skagway and Haines, wind chill advisories are in effect. That is still cold. It will still feel very cold, maybe just not as cold as if you're up in White Pass. Haines and Skagway and the lower road system there may see values that feel as cold as 45 to 55 below. We're also talking about wind chill advisories for the central interior, out down toward Tanana, the Deltana and Tanana Flats region, the eastern Alaska Range, and the upper Tanana Valley. All of these areas could feel as cold as 45 to 55 below tonight and into tomorrow. As we look out to the west, blizzard warning there for the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island, and the western end of the Seward Peninsula, generally north and west of Nome through Tin City. We are expecting that visibility, ceiling, and of course a little bit of snow, and gusty winds will continue. As of last check, we were looking at some gusts up around the 50 knot range there, 50 miles an hour, give or take. And again, poor visibility in that region because of that. Those steady south winds are not going to go away. You can see them on the satellite picture here. We have huge, stable, rough, tough, and hard to bluff high pressure sitting across the Yukon, over 1,050 millibars there. You know it's winter when we start to see those altimeter settings go up to a 1050 plus. And across southeast, you can see that cold, dry air draining out through the nooks and crannies of the inside passage, and also through the Copper River Valley, and also through Cook Inlet. And then we get out to the west, and all of that cold air moving southward is now pulled northward thanks to low pressure out here in the west, guiding that north like a conveyor belt. The jet stream is not helping us right now, as it is just pretty much stuck in this huge upside down U shape with that northerly flow pointed right over the interior of Alaska. So look at the satellite picture. You can see they're really not seeing a whole lot of eastern advance of that cloud cover. It is moving in just a little bit, but underneath there is a lot of dry air across the west coast, and those strong southerly winds are winning. We have a frontal boundary sitting right here across the Bering. Every time it moves a little bit further east, it starts to fall apart. So this is the next wave in that succession of frontal boundaries trying to work their way into the west coast. Here's our 1051 high. We have cold air moving out across the central and western Gulf, and we have that occluded front out across the west that just isn't going to stay the night. It looks like it will fall apart as it moves eastward. High pressure chewing into that already, and a steady south wind means snow and maybe a little bit of blowing snow, probably more blowing snow than actual snow falling out there across the Bering Strait region. As we look into tonight, you can see spotty snow showers out over the Gulf, probably not affecting most folks, but look at this tight pressure pattern across southeast, all due to that tremendous area of high pressure that is severely cold across the Alcan border and just inside of the Yukon. All of that is rushing down through southeast and looking for ways out around Valdez Narrows and across northern parts of southeast and Yakutat. It's also pushing air down in through the Yukon. Areas of ice fog will be possible again across those central regions around the Yukon and the upper Yukon flats. As we look out to the west, you can see that front working its way through the central and eastern Bering Sea, but here's that steady south wind, and it just can't make it further east. It falls apart as we head into your Thursday. Low pressure sits just west of the Gulf of Anadyr. A new low works its way up out of the North Pacific into the central chain at 978 millibars. A few areas of disturbed weather moving across south central. This may keep some wind moving through places like the Matanuska Valley, the Knik Valley, also around the nooks and crannies of the Kenai Peninsula, but for sure it looks like we will be dealing with a very blustery and cold day as a result for parts of southeast. Watch for that to continue. That also has effects on your marine areas with the threat for heavy freezing spray in northern southeast. So again, take extreme precautions there if you are heading out, and keep that as a risk as you're going out, because it is windy and it will be cold enough for that. Out across the west, snow and blowing snow certainly possible from Macoriac north through the Bering Strait, Savunga and Gamble included there. And around the Alaska Peninsula, periods of rain and snow as the remnants of that front move eastward. The unsettled weather will expand a little bit more into the Gulf as we head into your Friday. Snow showers approach, but probably not overtake southeast, all due to that drying wind coming out of the north. So it looks like that north wind is really going to be in charge, but we do have some unsettled weather that's going to try and work its way closer to the coastline. And the same goes for Kodiak Island. In fact, Kodiak, you may find a better chance for snow as that easterly flow comes in. Ceiling and viz and snow showers will likely move in as well. Now, the same goes for the Alaska Peninsula. The low pressure system will cross the central chain, moves east a little bit more. That puts more places like Adak and Atka, Nikolsky, and Unalaska into more of a wetter and perhaps snowier flow. You'll probably have some transitional weather from time to time. The wind looks like it might back off a little bit for the Bering Strait, but high pressure still in charge, and a little bit of a shift means you're right back in it, so be on your guard. Here's a look at temperatures as we go into early tomorrow morning. Anywhere from about 20 below in Fairbanks to 30 below around Eagle, 35 below for Northway. Southeast, Haines, looks like Gustavus could be anywhere from 2 to 10 below. Everywhere else in the single digits, but again, that's not counting the wind chill. Look for sub-zero readings around Cook Inlet. Again, plenty of ice in the northern end, 22 in Kodiak, 34 below in Arctic Village, 5 to 20 below for the Beaufort Seacoast out toward Point Barrow, 8 above in Nome, and looking at 2 below in Bethel, 12 above for Nunivak Island. On Thursday afternoon, expect high temperatures in southeast, single digits to about 20 at the warmest around Yakutat. Teens for most areas in Prince William Sound all the way down to Homer and Seward around 13, 21 below in Fairbanks, 35 below in Fort Yukon, and 5 above to about 5 below for the North Slope, Point Hope and Point Lay, looking at temps in the teens, 2 below for Grayling, Bethel up to 3 above, 36 in St. Paul, and almost 40 in Unalaska Dutch Harbor. 45 below in Fort Yukon for Friday morning, still cold for many other locations, a little bit milder as we head into South Central for Friday.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
And back with your aviation forecast now. IFR concerns will stretch from the Bering Strait all the way down through the eastern chain as that front is working its way eastward slowly, but into a lot more stable and drier air. We'll start out with marginal concerns across a large chunk of the Gulf. Some of that stretching as far west as Kodiak Island, but not nearly as far north as the northern Gulf Coast or parts of southeast for this point. The upper Tanana Valley also looking at marginal concerns, as well as areas across the Arctic. IFR stretching in through the Chukchi Sea and through the majority of Kotzebue Sound as well, and just kind of snaking its way into Norton Sound and westward into St. Lawrence Island. As we get into the afternoon, the main focus for lower ceiling and viz will be out across the west coast, generally across the Kotzebue Sound region, the Chukchi coast, and also across the western chain for Adak and Atka as low pressure is working through. On the east side of that, a strong southerly wind continues to push moisture northward, and that means places like St. Paul and St. George, Macoriac, areas into St. Lawrence Island will at least be marginal and at times IFR there. With strong winds working over St. Lawrence Island, there could be some snow visibility reductions as well. Look for marginal concerns across a large part of the Gulf. Kodiak Island still stays under MVFR. Most of southeast looking at VFR continued ceiling and viz at least through Friday morning. So things look pretty dry there, and really for most of the interior and all of South Central as we start up your Friday morning. Watch for patchy marginal concerns generally north of Kaktovik and Demarcation Point. Through the Bering Strait, IFR generally around Gamble and Savunga, and then southward towards St. Paul and St. George and Adak and Atka. Still looking at IFR as we go into the morning hours. As we get into the afternoon, marginal ceiling and viz continue for Kodiak Island. You'll see that starting to nose and creep into parts of the Kenai Fjords. Maybe not quite to Seward just yet, but changes will be coming. And across the central and eastern Gulf, no big change for that marginal area moving its way towards southeast, but never really quite getting there. St. Paul and St. George up to St. Matthew, St. Lawrence Island, all the way through the Bering Strait. No big change there out across the west. IFR is still dipping into places like Adak and west toward Shemya. Here's your pass concerns as we go through your Thursday. Anik, Tuvik, and Adigan pass look pretty good at this point. VFR there. And really most of the Alaska range, Lake Clark and Merrill, Rainy Pass, Windy Pass, and Isabel Pass, all expected to be VFR throughout the day. One exception to that would be a little bit further east in Mentasta. It looks like that will hold on to marginal as we go throughout your entire Thursday there. Tanita Pass, though, at this point, looking like VFR. Portage Pass, VFR, and Chilkoot and White Pass, windy, but VFR is expected. Your freezing levels show a big change from what we were showing yesterday. We had a lot of warm air that had made its way up into southern parts of the Bering. That has been pushed southward once again, and you can see the surface freezing line has nosed up to the Gulf of Anadyr, but that elevated warming is gone. The surface freezing line now south of Kodiak Island and well south of southeastern Alaska as cold, high pressure pushes its way off of the interior of Alaska. Icing potential then is also reduced. You can see the moisture stream is very, very thin, stretching from the Gulf of Anadyr to about Nikolsky and Unalaska Dutch Harbor, Akutan, and just about to Cold Bay and Falls Pass. Levels there range from about 3 to maybe 5,000 feet and higher. That does include areas around St. Paul and St. George, and a little bit of a lower area here across Adak out towards Shemya, generally above 3,000 feet. All of these areas probably not more than isolated moderate risk at this point. Jet stream has a high amplitude ridge of high pressure across the west coast of Alaska. That is sending us a deep southerly flow, and a strong one at that, across the western Bering Sea. But for most of the mainland and most of you watching tonight, it is that northerly flow in the jet that is controlling our weather and giving us another resurgence of that big, deep winter cold. Wind speeds here 95 to 165 knots coming in from the north, and that means a deep tap of cold Arctic air coming our way. At 9,000 feet, a north and easterly flow working in out of the Canadian interior, helped by low pressure here across the eastern Gulf, dragging in winds through our canyons and valleys across southeastern Alaska, making for a continued windy situation there, and cold offshore winds working their way out into the eastern Bering, helping to grow more ice there. Southerlies, though, just west of that, 50 to 70 knots, and you can see that flow also at 3,000 feet. High pressure in charge here with that easterly continental flow, a south and easterly flow coming up over Norton Sound, Kotzebue Sound, and low pressure here working out across the western Bering, dragging in westerly winds that are only going north and not moving into the greater Alaska region there, simply keeping a lot of moisture and what we would call active weather out of Alaska. So for the meantime, low pressure working with a cold high pressure system, keeping it windy and cool for many. So our concerns for turbulence are going to focus around the interior of the Seward Peninsula, generally north of Nome, and also around the Alaska Range and parts of southeast for low-level wind shear and strong gap winds, generally below 4,000 to 6,000 feet and a little higher across the southern interior.
Dual polarization technology is a major upgrade to the current radar system. It allows forecasters a better idea of what's actually out there and can help keep you safe.
Current radar technology transmits and receives information in the horizontal direction, which is very limited. Dual polarization technology, in addition to the horizontal, transmits and receives vertical energy, which allows forecasters to get information about the size, shape, and phase of the precipitation. We can use that information to better determine the precipitation type to expect at your given location.
There you have it. This new technology is currently being installed in radars across the country and is already being used by National Weather Service forecasters to produce better, more accurate forecasts. Learn more here and follow us. Want to know about the future of weather radar? Well, the National Severe Storms Lab has it here with its new phased array radar. Let's check it out.
It's a non-moving radar. It has 4 faces of the antenna, each pointing in different directions. One of the big advantages is that we're seeing so far, it can sample the area around the radar in less than a minute, maybe even a half a minute. And this is 5-6 times faster than what they can do today.
NSSL is leading the development of future weather radar with this project. Learn more here and follow us. The Storm Prediction Center is one of the NOAA weather partners. They are located in the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. Greg Carbon gives us a glimpse into what the SPC does.
Our mission is to analyze and forecast severe thunderstorms and the potential for tornadoes, large hail, and damaging winds from those thunderstorms across the lower 48 states, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. One of the primary missions of the Storm Prediction Center is the issuance of severe thunderstorm and tornado watches across the country when conditions appear to be coming together to support the development of severe thunderstorms and tornadoes.
The world-class meteorologists in the Storm Prediction Center specialize in severe weather and keeping you safe. Learn more here and follow us.
The National Severe Storms Lab is working on increasing the lead time for severe weather warnings. The national average for tornado warnings is currently 13 minutes, but more notice would be helpful, especially for those in charge of moving large groups to shelter. Warn on Forecast will help forecasters issue hazardous weather warnings earlier. The project will give them more info about the chances of strong winds, large hail, and even tornadoes.
Currently, warnings are created by forecasters looking at the atmosphere outside, understanding its volatility, and then comparing that to how they see the Doppler radar presenting what's going on inside thunderstorms. Warn on Forecast is an idea where we're going to take the massive amounts of satellite, radar, and surface data and stick them all into a very high resolution prediction model. And then by producing new forecasts every 15 or 20 minutes, the forecasters hopefully will be able to use that model to produce warnings that extend out to an hour.
Before the National Weather Service can use this tool, it must be developed and tested. One big challenge will be deciding how to get the model predictions to the forecasters.
I'm going to keep this one very low. I'm just adjusting the track.
These hazardous weather prediction models are going to produce a huge amount of output. And this fire hose of data is just too much for forecasters to handle in real time quickly. So in order to help deal with that, NSSL has developed a related project called Facets. And Facets is the methodology which will enable forecasters to focus very quickly on the most important threats.
Once Warn on Forecast and Facets are proven to be reliable and effective, then forecasters will be better able to inform you of threats nearby. Learn more here and follow us.
The Hazardous Weather Testbed is located at the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma. It is used for experiments that will allow forecasters to learn and apply new technologies.
The Hazardous Weather Testbed is a really unique space throughout all of NOAA. And this is where the researchers and the operational folks come together in a common space to solve operational problems and to test new research tools that the research community is working on. The goal is to accelerate the transfer from research to operations of the newest tools and techniques.
People come from around the world to collaborate on this unique project.
We can bring together not only NOAA people, but also university people, faculty, researchers, private sector meteorologists, folks working in other countries in meteorology, forecasters can all come together and focus on what the problem of the day is with the forecasters.
Each spring, several experiments occur in the Hazardous Weather Testbed. Learn more here and follow us.
What are you looking at? And what are you ignoring? Did you notice the NOAA logo in the corner? Forecasters have a lot of information in front of them too. Every second counts during severe weather, and decisions about where to focus are constantly being made. This could be even more challenging in the future. Phased array radar will produce 4 to 6 times more information than what we have now, which brings us to the question researchers are hoping to answer. Will more radar information affect forecasters' decisions?
From our past experiments, we've learned a lot about how forecasters think during the warning decision process, but we've also learned that those thought processes are very complex, and for that reason, we need a better way to be able to track forecasters' cognitive activity.
Inbounds and possibly golf ball sized hail.
An eye tracker is a piece of technology that is used to determine in real time where someone's eye gaze is located. And these eye trackers are typically video-based, which means a camera sits below a computer monitor, and with infrared light and vector analysis, we can determine where a person is looking and how their eyes are moving.
Eye tracking is already being used in the medical field and air traffic control. Using similar research methods, NSSL is discovering the benefit for weather forecasting too. Phased array radar will give forecasters a lot more to think about. Understanding their decision-making process will help researchers develop even more user-friendly tools. So what's the benefit for you? Even better weather warnings. To learn more, check us out online and follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to Alaska Weather. Let's take a look at the sea ice conditions here, analyzed by our sea ice desk. You can see that the pack ice is slowly moving northward. There's some openings developing just north of St. Lawrence Island, also in Norton Sound, as well as Diomede. And you can also see the pack ice continuing through into Bristol Bay. Thursday's marine forecast for southeast, looking at strong northerly winds continuing, especially over the Lynn Canal. Northerly at 15 knots, seas as high as 11 feet. Otherwise, through much of the central and southern port of the inside waters, we're going to be looking at 20 to 30 knots. Out along the Gulf Coast, we're going to be looking at generally winds from the northeast at 30 to 40 knots with seas as high as 13 feet. And for Friday's forecast, continued strong north winds across the inside waters, the Lynn Canal and Stevens Passage from the north at 40 knots, and the southern part of that inside waters northerly at 25 knots. Out along the Gulf Coast, we're looking at 25 across the north and 35 to 40 across the central and southern part of the Gulf region. Thursday's marine forecast for south central northeasterly winds prevail across much of the northeast Gulf and Prince William Sound. And inside Cook Inlet, we're going to be looking at 15 to 30 with seas as high as 10 feet of the southern part of the Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay area. Friday's forecast, looking at, again, winds generally from the east or northeast at 15 to 25 across Prince William Sound, Gulf Coast, with winds generally from the east, again from 25 knots, and out along the Cook Inlet region, generally northerly conditions 15 to 25 with seas as high as 9 feet. Thursday's forecast for Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island. Around Kodiak Island, generally from the northeast or east at 30 to 25 knots with seas as high as 18 feet as you get down here towards Alaska Peninsula. And on the north side of that peninsula, looking at southeasterly at 30 knots, Bristol Bay region easterly at 25 knots. Friday's forecast for Kodiak Island, Alaska Peninsula, looking at generally winds from the east at 20 to 25 knots across the peninsula. Winds from the east as well, 25 to 30 with seas as high as 16 feet. And in Bristol Bay from the northeast at 20 knots. Aleutian Chain, variable winds there with that front moving through. We're looking at winds generally from the east or west. Again, winds as high as 30 to 35 knots, seas as high as 20 feet here. As you get out into the western Aleutians, winds generally from the west at 25 knots, but a little bit more of a southerly direction near Kiska at southeasterly at 35 knots. And for Friday's forecast, again, winds generally from the east or northeast at 20 to 30 knots, seas as high as 19 feet. On the south side of that, winds out on the western loosen chain from the east or west and northwest, 25 to 30 knots. For the west coast, looking at winds along the pack ice, generally from the southeast at 35 to 40 knots. In Norton Sound, easterly from 30 knots. And out along the ice edge, as you get close to St. Matthew Island, winds from the southeast of 40, seas as high as 25 feet. And Pribs from the southeast at 30 knots, seas as high as 17 feet. Friday's forecast, looking at winds generally from the east at 25 knots, and Norton Sound we're 15 knots from the east, and out along the edge of the pack ice, winds generally from the east at 25 knots. Out on the Nordic slope, Beaufort Sea, southeasterly 10 to 15 knots. Through the Bering Strait, looking at 35 to 40 knots from the southeast. And for the Arctic on Friday's marine forecast, winds in Beaufort Sea 15 to 20. And then through the Bering Strait, 25 knots from the southeast. Tonight's weather, we're going to be looking at, again, that front slowly stalls out there in the Bering Sea with mixed precipitation along that boundary. Also, high pressure remains across the mainland with freezing fog, and in some areas, very strong winds out along the southeast. This is Eric Holloway for the National Weather Service. Thank you.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.